Welcome to the latest episode of No Jitter on Air. My name is Ryan Daly, Associate Editor with No Jitter, and I'll be your host for today. On today's show, we are talking all things Microsoft Teams with Microsoft MVP Randy Chapman. Randy is a leading consultant who specializes in helping global customers meet their digital transformation goals with the help of Microsoft Teams. In addition to his work at the IT professional service firm Simity, Randy is a conference co-organizer and a blogger and podcaster at ucstatus.com, where he provides detailed insights into the latest Microsoft Teams news. During our conversation, we discuss some of the recent Teams features that your enterprise should know about and what we might see from Microsoft in the future around collaboration. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Randy Chapman. I want to thank you for joining us today on the No Jitter podcast. Before we dive into today's conversation, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your work with Microsoft Teams, and maybe share one interesting fact about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me again. So my name's Randy Chapman. I have been involved in the kind of UC community, I guess, for the last 11 or 12 years, starting at the tail end of Office Communicator or OCS. Did my first deployment of Link 2010, 11 years ago. And really, it's kind of been nothing but that ever since. When Teams came along in about 4.5 years ago, I kind of grabbed onto it with both hands. And, I saw the future, and it seemed like a good bet. So I kind of here we are 4.5 years later. In my personal life, I'm a blogger, quite a busy blogger. I have a podcast, both on ucstatus.com. I'm growing a YouTube channel. I'm a conference organizer for commsverse.com, which is an in-person Teams-focused conference here in the UK. Not quite the Enterprise Connect, but one day we strive to be something like that. But nonetheless, very good for a community-run event. And interesting fact about myself. So I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, a little over 49 years ago. And I moved to the UK about 26 years ago. I'd had enough of the heat. And really, I've kind of been here ever since. Got a wife and 2 kids at home, plus a grown-up son who lives down in Worthing.
That's wonderful. And I could attest, my grandparents lived in just outside of Phoenix, so I could understand the heat. I guess it's probably going from the heat to the rain in the UK.
Exactly right, yeah.
But, as you're talking about this, you mentioned, Teams has only been around. I mean, we're getting close to the 5-year mark. But over the course, I'm even going to say just the last 6 months, there has been tons of Teams changes, that there's new features, and I mean, things are getting rolled out. So I thought a good place to start with the conversation with Teams is just kind of doing an overview. What is Microsoft really trying to accomplish with Teams, and what are some of the core areas that they're focused on?
Yeah, so Teams gets about 100 features a year, probably a little more than that, actually. Some things are seen, a lot of things aren't seen. So things like stability of the platform, just enhancements in admin scenarios, trying to make things, even like the PowerShell module now has a combined module with the old Skype module, so you can get at Teams and Skype for Business Online commands. There's loads of features coming to the admin centers and all of that, and that's stuff that users don't see, but admins themselves will obviously appreciate. The big one that is really a necessary thing is when you go from 40-something million daily active users to 75 million of the daily active users at the beginning of last year, and then doubling that in the space of 12 months to 145 million DAU, then the biggest focus really has to be on stability of the platform and just being able to cope with that. And I think Microsoft, right at the beginning, there was a couple of wobbles when they saw some really big growth numbers as people got sent home due to the pandemic. But really, ever since then, Microsoft has been not only keeping up with it, but way ahead of the curve. And even, going as far as, enhancing things like larger Teams meetings. Now you can have a Teams meeting with 1,000 people in it, and even 20,000 people, kind of as a what I call the kind of sitting row at the back, where you can't see them or hear from them, but they can still participate. Enhancements to live events and just the whole meetings thing in general. And I think if I needed to focus on one thing, there's been a lot of voice things. There's been a lot of enhancements to security and compliance and governance. But I think the biggest thing for me is got to be all of the kind of meeting stuff. And if you think about before the pandemic and before everybody got sent home, meetings were generally face to face. There were some online meetings, clearly, you didn't want to just hop on a plane to go and do a 1 hour meeting or something. But a lot of meetings where it was practical was face to face, particularly when you're in an office. You're collaborating with your colleagues, you're going into a meeting room and you're sitting around a table and having that kind of face to face meeting with your team. And then where you couldn't, and again, where it was practical, you'd hop on a train, get in a car or something and go and actually meet your customers. But everything, everybody got sent home and meetings had to be online. So really the focus area that Microsoft is, if you look at all of their what's new articles that come out kind of at the last day of the month or first of the following month, the first thing they talk about is meetings in general. And, things like, the always present U bar. I know that the U bar is the meeting control thing where you get the hang up and you get the more button and you can raise your hand and all that kind of stuff and change your volume and get out your background and stuff. Well, that's moved around a few times. It was docked to the bottom, then it was floating on top and you had to kind of wiggle the mouse to see it. And now it's docked at the top now, so you can always see it, always get at it. And I think that's a really big enhancement. Things like the large gallery, being able to see more of your colleagues when you're in bigger meetings, that's really, really cool. It's 49, and I think they're even working on, potentially even larger than that. Dynamic views, again, another great enhancement to meetings, being able to really use that screen real estate. People are getting larger monitors to try and cope with the amount of information that's on there. But there's even things like, the AI features that shouldn't be ignored. So background blur, another great thing. I've got background replace turned on because my background is quite messy with green screens and meeting room equipment and a bunch of other stuff behind me. You don't need to see that. But then the biggest one probably is, things like, the noise suppression. Teams has got built-in noise suppression that really cancels out, your partner at home vacuuming or the dogs or the kids running around hanging off your leg, that kind of thing. All of these things have helped, to isolate the people, in a good way. Rather than having your own office, some people have to work at the kitchen table or in the conservatory or in the living room even, just in a little corner. And being able to do all of this in an environment that is conducive to do so, not only for yourself, but also for the people far end. I think, those are the big things that Microsoft has been focusing on.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Microsoft has been very busy rolling out all these features and stuff. And I think this is actually a good segue into my next question, kind of looking back at the last 6 months, let's say. What would you say are just maybe 2 or 3 features that you think don't get enough attention? It could be stuff from Microsoft Ignite, or like you said, Microsoft has these what's new blogs. Is there something that you feel is not getting as much of attention that could really provide enterprises and their teams with better ways to collaborate and communicate?
That's a tough one. I mean, I look back through the last 6 or 7 What's News and some of the other companion blogs that come out on some new stuff, and it's so much about meetings that you can't really kind of get away from all of that. A big one, kind of recently, I guess the last 2 or 3 months, is being able to do a poll in a meeting. But also alongside that, just being able to use the first and third party applications inside of a meeting to actually enrich the whole meeting experience. Things like, the meeting recap. Your colleagues can't all be together at the same time, particularly when you work across time zones and different boundaries and stuff. So being able to invite people that can't be there in person, but be able to catch up offline, get out the recording, any attachments that are there, obviously all the meeting chat, any notes that you take during it, but also things, for accessibility like transcription. So you can now turn on live transcription, and that saves off a file that you can go back and read after the fact if you can't hear what's going on. So all those things are really great. Things like breakout rooms. This is a feature that a competing platform I won't mention has had for a little while now. This is probably more aimed at the education space, but also things like webinars. And I've even had customers that wanted to use it for even things like courtroom type stuff. And then, as I just mentioned, the noise suppression and all the AI stuff, together mode. Some might see it as a gimmick, but I think it's a good way to actually bring people together. And there's now new stuff for together mode where you can actually design your own scene to make people, put people in the kind of environment that you want. I've seen examples of like, the Muppet Show and the Brady Bunch and all of that kind of stuff. It's all really good. And then my personal favorite kind of real hidden gem that people really don't use enough, and I get a lot of excuses about why they don't use it this way, is the new PowerPoint Live. I have to share PowerPoint decks in probably 80% of my meetings, even if it's just a couple of slides to set the scene. So rather than share your screen and turn on presenter, the presenter mode where you got the notes on one screen and the transitions and stuff, you can actually upload the PowerPoint file into the meeting and actually get out the presenter mode for that. So you can see the current slide, any meeting notes, but also the slide sorter. So, for those people that say, oh, I like to dart back and forth between, different slides and chop and change and this kind of thing, that excuse is long gone now. You can get out the whole slide sorter and actually find the exact slide you want and start presenting that. And, I think that's the biggest hidden gem of the recent kind of tranche of meeting updates.
You did. I think here I'm going to sneak in a question I didn't have initially on my drafted questions, but you talked a little bit about how Microsoft is, allowing for more customizations, for the Together mode specifically. But we just kind of came off of Microsoft Build, and it seemed like there was just a big focus on allowing people to customize, different elements of Teams. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. Are we going to see more like that? Are people going to spend the time to build these custom Together modes?
Again, together modes aren't for everybody. There's some that just think it's a bit of a gimmick, but there's a lot of people I know that actually do rely on it. And the whole point of the together mode is, if you think about the gallery and you think about you in the bottom corner or the top right corner or wherever you kind of your self view, you're really detached from the people that you're speaking to. With together mode, the whole point of it is to try and bring everybody that is all over the place, whether they're in different offices within your organization or different customers or just everybody working from home. The whole point of together mode is bringing people into the same space for the first time. And that's what a lot of people are actually missing when it comes to, the Teams meetings. So being able to customize together modes to bring people into a space that's fun and conducive to doing things, whether it's, a long desk, a movie theater, an amphitheater. Some of the examples that Microsoft has, like the aquarium and stuff, is definitely a bit of a gimmick and probably for your Friday afternoon before knocking off calls and stuff. But, these things really shouldn't be ignored. Putting people in the same space. They even did some real research, and I mean scientific research, to try and find out what's happening with your brain. When you have a meeting with just the standard gallery where you're down in the bottom right, probably looking at yourself, because that's just naturally what we all do. We try and find out whether our face is in the right frame and that kind of thing, and then just looking at the whites of the eyes of all the participants. But when you can bring people and put people in the same room, the brain starts to relax. It's quite an interesting phenomenon, really. So I think there's a lot of people that are gonna take advantage of it in the beginning and start creating some stuff, and then after a while you're going to settle on a few that you kind of will use on a daily basis or a monthly basis or something like that. The development will start to slow down, I think, and then people will just get on with it and use it how they want to use it.
Well, thanks for that insight. And I think another area that Microsoft is putting a lot of attention and we're seeing some interest building is in the area of VR and AR. And going back to Microsoft Ignite this year, they had the big presentation with Microsoft Mesh. So from an enterprise perspective, we've been kind of, talking about it like, oh, how practical is this for a team to collaborate using VR? I was curious if your thoughts on just Microsoft's overall VR AR initiative, and just it does that coupled with Teams, is that like the next evolution of collaborating?
Microsoft would want you to think that all this AR, VR stuff is the next evolution of collaborating. I mean, if you look at things like HoloLens, in the UK we've got an event called Future Decoded, and it's been going for a number of years. And every year I'll sit in the keynote theater and they'll put on some videos about HoloLens and HoloLens 2 and how businesses are using it. And I've always seen it as, with augmented reality or virtual reality in general, it's about creating a space that is hard to build or expensive to build in the real world, letting people step inside of it to interact with it, but also then dynamically change it. Things like automotive design, being able to build a car in virtual space is probably a lot more practical than trying to build it out of, whatever they build it out of, Rice Krispie treats and Play-Doh and stuff.
It's not as delicious being in VR as Rice Krispies.
Yeah. But factories and automation and stuff, trying to figure out where things go into space. People like industrial designers or furniture people, or just architects in general and stuff, being able to build and interact with the space and have customers interact with that space before they commit to something. All of that is great. One thing that's always intrigued me is and they've been talking about this since the Skype for Business days, even before Teams was announced, is being able to use things like HoloLens and just the competing technologies, the Oculuses of the world, and be able to have meetings with colleagues. I mean, think about, we're having a video meeting now, and you can see me, I can see you, and that's great. And I don't have anything on my face apart from my glasses, but you think about, having a meeting with somebody that's wearing a giant rig on their face, or even just something unobtrusive like the HoloLens. Is that the greatest way you can have a meeting? Do you want to look at an avatar of somebody? In which case, what's the point of having a video meeting in general anyway, if you're going to be staring at somebody's Minecraft avatar or something? So I don't know. The big thing for me is with the AR stuff is being able to hire these really skilled people, lock them in a room somewhere where they can be taken. I say taken advantage of is probably the wrong choice of words, but where you can make the most use of them. And then you send the kind of learners and the kind of this slightly cheaper labor out to do these visits and stuff, to go and fix hot water heaters or some sort of factory stuff, and they plonk on their HoloLens, they look at the thing, and they have a Teams meeting with a skilled person back at the office where they can circle something in real life, or they can put some instructions on the screen. All of that, I think, is where I want to see all of this AR, VR type stuff. And it, having those meetings in Teams or Skype before that, just really makes sense. Being able to have this heads-up display to help you navigate the real world, I think that's where it needs to go. With this mesh stuff, putting people in the same place, I think that's kind of a continuation of the together mode. Rather than having somebody's torso and head sitting behind a desk or something like that, if you can try and put people actually in the space together. Microsoft purchased a company called AltVR probably a year and a bit ago, and it's been a slow start. We actually used it at Commsverse for some of our stands and booths and stuff, to have kind of a hybrid space for a virtual conference, and that was great. And Microsoft took advantage of that and kind of ran with it for with the mesh stuff. And I think, watch this space. I think it's going to get really exciting.
Interesting. And I think that's I think it's like we sometimes look to the futuristic stuff and kind of almost not disregard, but like sometimes video meeting, like you said, is the better alternative. It's like, oh, I could see you. You don't look like a Minecraft character. It's so we have really good technology, and we had these companies have gotten us to the point where it's reliable, looks pretty good. Yeah, I think sometimes it's like we lose sight of what's in front of us. I guess what I'm trying to say.
If you think about the panacea of these kind of AR meetings and stuff, two examples that really spring out. I'm a Star Wars fan and a Star Trek fan. I'm one of those kind of multi fans, multi-star something fans. Anyway, so with Star Wars, you've got the Jedi Council all sitting around. Yoda will be a hologram in his chair, and Mace Windu will be a hologram in his chair because he's off battling somewhere. Or you have this thing you hold up in front of you, and there's a hologram of Darth Vader standing in front of you, shouting orders or something. And then if we go to the Star Trek world, you've got the holodeck. And to me, that would be how awesome would that be, to be able to create this whole space where you can have a mixture of real and virtual characters and a whole environment that you can interact with. That to me is the panacea. And if Microsoft can get anywhere close to that, I think that's where they need to be looking. You say it's futuristic, but what we saw with that mesh stuff, yeah, that's starting to really look like it could edge that way.
We're kind of running out on time, but I think a good place to end is, so we talked a lot about features, we talked a little bit about VR, AR, together mode, but looking at the next 6 months, let's say, of Microsoft Teams, do you have any predictions on what's coming? Do you think that there's anything that you would like to see? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what's coming next for Microsoft Teams.
So in the public roadmap, there's 3 features that I kind of made a note of. And, one is webinars. That's going to be a really big thing for people that need to use it, and just all the enhancements around that. So being able to actually schedule not just a standard Teams meeting, but a webinar people can sign up to. And then you can actually get at that data after the webinar has been had, and actually export that out into your Dynamics CRM, and then actually go back and market to those customers and keep the conversation going. That's going to be a big thing. But alongside that, I mentioned that Dynamics 365, Dynamics in general has been around for quite a long time, and it's always been this, I don't know, it's not a poor cousin, it's the kind of the side cousin that doesn't play with anybody else at the party. It's never really had a lot to do with everything else. If you ever wanted to do a screen pop of a customer record in Dynamics, you needed a third party or some way to actually harness that power and trickery to try and get at that data. If you wanted to go the other way and actually start a conversation from within Dynamics and use the other technology like Skype, all you could do was a click to call, which was really just a URL. But now there's some really cool things coming where you'll be able to actually use Teams within Dynamics to search for your record and then start that call, which then creates that conversation record. And those things were always the domain of contact centers and those kind of technologies. So finally we're getting this reality where Dynamics remembers that it's working for the same company where they have this UC tool, and that's got me really excited. I'm really looking forward to how that's going to open up with things. And then the big thing that if you think about guest access, and everybody that has Teams, you either work in an insular way where you're working with colleagues inside the company, or you work with a mixture of internal and external people. And I think most companies that aren't super secret and have massive security concerns about bringing outside people in will have guest access. And guest access is a way to bring to add an external person to an internal team, so you can all collaborate in the same way. So they can have, start conversations if you allow them to. They can reply to threads. They can get at your files, even use the tabs and get at all the information, while a project is going on or as an extended thing. And then when you're done with them, you can kind of kick them out, as it were. And that's all great. However, the biggest bugbear for people that have this guest access is the fact that you've always needed to do a tenant switch. So somebody who adds you to as a guest to their team, you have to click on some sort of allow thing to get added to their environment. and kind of adhere to their terms and conditions. And then you have to log out effectively from your environment and then log into their environment just to see that one thing. And while you're there, you can't get at all your own, your existing stuff. You can't hop around your own conversations and get at your own teams. And even things like phone calls, what happens when you log out of your environment and into somebody else's, the phone calls stop. So where you need to work in your daily life in Teams, that's always been a bit of a pain. So there's a new feature called Teams Connect, or what they also call shared channels, where you can actually add an external member to a specific channel inside of a team, and that channel is then added to their home tenant, which means they won't have to switch anymore. So if you talk about collaboration with internal or external, being able to collaborate externally and reduce that friction, I think that's going to be massive. When that finally lands, I really think that's going to break the internet. The ability to actually just collaborate with those. I'm a member of so many different teams of either customers or suppliers and vendors and things like that. And having to switch is a real pain, but not having to in the future, I think, is going to be a huge, big kind of win for the collaboration space.
So yeah, we're just out of time now. So I would like to thank you, Randy, for taking some time out and speaking with us on behalf of No Jitter and the whole team. Just thank you again for taking some time out and letting us know what's going on with Teams.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Look forward to the next one.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and make sure to stay tuned for more podcasts from Randy and I in the future. We'll be discussing other Teams-related topics. So until then, take care.